Thank you for joining me for another episode of Timmy G's Talking Stuff and Stuff. Today is our second episode. I realized after I did the introduction video that I didn't talk about me as a horror fan. You know, I talked about my health problems, I talked about being a musician, I dragged on and on and on about that stuff, and I totally skipped the horror stuff. So, at any rate, let's talk.
Timmy G is talking stuff. He's talking stuff. Timmy G be talking stuff, he talking about stuff.
Alright, let's see where to begin. I've been watching horror movies as far back as I can remember. The earliest I remember, I don't know, maybe around even the age of 2 or 3, maybe. Mom and Dad would let me sit up and watch movies like Creature from the Black Lagoon, the old Dracula with Bela Lugosi, Village of the Damned, even Night of the Living Dead. And they were, I was in love, at that young of an age. And I think Creature from the Black Lagoon at that time was probably my favorite, and I don't really even know why. It was, it just stuck with me for some reason. Loved the Gill Man. But, and Village of the Damned would become one of my favorites actually later in life. I don't know, I think Village of the Damned was one of those movies that I know I watched at a very early age, but I guess I forgot about. I didn't watch hadn't seen it for years and years and years until again maybe in 1995, 96 somewhere, and I saw it at the library, and I said, oh, I think I remember that movie, but I don't remember it very well, so I went and watched it again and fell in love with it all over again. I think as a almost adult at that time, I think I was able to appreciate it better. The way that they just start out the movie, it's like within the first 10 minutes, you think the whole town is dead. It just dropped for no reason, and it catches you, you're like, without words, and up to the end, I don't want to give too much details in case there's viewers here that haven't seen it. Go see it. Not the remake with Christopher Reeves. That one was crap. It took, way too long to build up in the beginning, and they decided to change the ending, and both of those were perfect the way they were. I know that when you remake a movie or you reboot a movie, you want to change stuff so that, you still are able to offer a few surprises. But at the same time, the original just was perfect. You could have done it and changed some stuff in the middle that would have worked, but the beginning and the end was perfect the way that it was. But at any rate, if you haven't seen Village of the Damned, go see Village of the Damned. At any rate, somewhere between the age of 5 and 7 was when I found Freddy and Jason, and I guess Michael Myers at that was around the same time, and Hellraiser, and then eventually Child's Play. And my mother tried like hell to keep me from watching those movies, but I always found ways to watch them. She was okay with the classic stuff, but a lot of that newer stuff, I guess, to her was just too gory, too bloody. Plus, when the girls take their tops off, She wasn't too happy about that, but you know, she was just, as a parent, you gotta make a balance between being your kid's friend and being your kid's parent, and she was trying to walk that line. So I definitely don't fault her. But I remember one time me and cousin Larry went to stay with my aunt Joanne for a weekend. At any rate, she let us sit up and watch Friday. At the time, I think there was only 5, and she had let us sit up and watch parts 1 through 5. And we came back, and somehow my mom found out, and she was pissed. She didn't. I think she didn't talk to Joanne for a couple months after that incident, and But what was funny is that Poppy, my grandfather Poppy, he had a massive VHS collection, and he had, I think it was parts 1 and 3, and me and cousin Chris would go over to his house all the time and watch, particularly part 3, and as well as the first Nightmare on Elm Street. And sometimes we'd watch them over and over and over, and Mom knew about it and never said a word to Poppy because I think she knew that Poppy wasn't gonna have it. If he thought it was okay for us to watch them, then he was gonna let us watch them. And of course, we watched them, and we watched a whole lot more, and never got we never turned into psycho serial killers or anything. I just was becoming a horror fan. So I traversed through the years, and eventually I started founding like Trauma and Toxic Avenger. I actually think I saw Toxic Crusaders before I saw the Toxic Avenger. And if you've seen both, the Toxic Crusaders was a cartoon meant for children based on Toxic Avenger, which is totally not kid friendly, like at all. Just no. But so I was blown away actually when I saw Toxic Avenger and Toxie 2, Toxie 3. What was the last one they did? Basically, I can't remember the name, but they decided that was the true sequel to the original. That parts 2 and 3 didn't matter anymore. They were erased from history. But of course, we've still seen them. Oh, Citizen Toxie, that was the name of it, Citizen Toxie. But of course, that would be years and years later. And later, somewhere down the line, I was probably around 16 or 17, and my boy Bubby introduced me to a whole bunch of trauma movies that I didn't even know existed. Stuff like Redneck Zombies, The Chosen One with Carmen Electra, and Tromeo and Juliet. And of course, much, much later was some of my goofy favorites like Coon's Night of the Bandits of the Night, Poultrygeist. Poultrygeist was one of the only horror movies that actually made me lose my appetite. So, Poultrygeist was a trip. But anyway, I'm jumping huge time links, but I don't know. I was through my teenage years, got more and more into different stuff, and Gremlins. Gremlins, of course, I was still, God, I don't know, when did Gremlins come out? I'm thinking like I was around 8 or 9 or something, and Gremlins was just, as I was telling somebody at the Summit House recently, Gremlins was my favorite Christmas movie. And, most of the time when you talk about Christmas movies, you're talking about Miracle on 34th Street or A Christmas Carol or, one of those type of movies. But no, Gremlins was my favorite Christmas movie. Seconded only by Die Hard. But that's another wave in another ocean. But, Gremlins was fantastic. I learned later from a video on YouTube, they have all those things you didn't know or might not have known about this movie, that movie. And I found out that originally Gizmo was supposed to turn into Stripe. And that blew my mind. And I thought, how much more compelling that would have been if Gizmo had have turned into Stripe instead of being just a bubble from Gizmo. I thought that might have been that would have been more compelling. But keeping Gizmo, the fuzzy, friendly, good guy, I guess, was made the movie more fun and family based, I guess. I'm not gonna knock him hard for it because it was still an awesome movie, and Gremlins 2 was awesome too. So but I found Evil Dead. I actually watched the first three movies in reverse. The first one I saw was Army of Darkness, and I must have been around, I don't know, maybe 13, somewhere around, maybe even 12, and it was, it was awesome. How could you not like Army of Darkness? And I really didn't know anything about the Evil Dead movies at that point. And so then one day I rented Evil Dead 2, and whoa, this is a lot different, but like a lot better in a lot of ways. There was, I think, really more one-liners in Army of Darkness, but Evil Dead 2 was just wow. For a real horror fan, Evil Dead 2 was the shiznit. All kinds of blood, funny moments, jump scares. And to this day, Evil Dead 2 is my favorite out of the franchise, at least as far as the movies go. Ash versus Evil Dead is, that's my favorite of the whole series, I think, right now. But out of those three original movies, Evil Dead 2 was my favorite. So then I watched the original Evil Dead after Evil Dead 2. And, that, of course, the original was awesome. I think we all know that. But, I loved all of them. And, Jason is, Jason might be my favorite of all time. I know things got really wacky when New Line Cinema took over the Friday the 13th franchise. And, I'm not going to argue that because, Jason Goes to Hell, he's traveling from body to body because people are eating his heart. And Jason X is, Jason X. I mean, if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. It's just, huh? Freddy versus Jason, though, I really, really liked. I know a lot of people talked trash on it, but, Freddy versus Jason, I thought was awesome. You couldn't expect too many plot twists and stuff for a Jason or Freddy movie at this point. And, so the way that they did it, I don't think it really could have been much better than it was. It was a fun, entertaining 2 hours or whatever it was. So that was really, really cool. Friday the 13th Part 4 is definitely my favorite out of all the Jason movies. Uh, Corey Feldman, and Corey Feldman being the one to actually and finally kill Jason. In a lot of ways, part six was where it started getting a little ridiculous. Even though I loved him, but in part five, they explain that they cremated Jason after Tommy Jarvis basically chopped him up into a whole bunch of little pieces. If you remember the scene, die, 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 die. But yeah, so they explain in part five that they cremated Jason, and so there's the copycat killer for part five. Then you got part six starts off where Tommy Jarvis digs up Jason, and suddenly he's a whole corpse. But then Tommy Jarvis, being the one to actually kill Jason, incidentally resurrects Jason. That being said, part six, Jason Lives, is my second favorite of the series. If I was to pick a least favorite out of the Jason series, I would probably say actually part seven, The New Blood, just because the whole telekinesis thing felt a little off for a Jason movie. But at any rate, Nightmare on Elm Street, I don't even know which is my favorite, because I loved all of them. I could say my least favorite was New Nightmare, mostly because in New Nightmare, it was a good movie. It was, there wasn't anything too wrong with it until the very end. And the end just ruined it for me. I felt like, really? That's it? They found the script and, that's it? It just felt like they couldn't think of an ending, so they just came up with the stupidest idea that came to mind, and that's what they did. So, but Child's Play. Child's Play was another one that was really high up there, the idea that you got this little possessed doll, Chucky, or the good guy's doll, Charles Lee Ray, and or possessed by Charles Lee Ray. It was, for the time, it was great. Now you've got all kinds of movies about possessed dolls and things like that, to the point that it's almost, too much. But there are some good ones, good recent ones. And, so it's not like Chucky was the first possessed doll, but, there wasn't a whole lot of them back when Child's Play first came out. At least not that I remember. But eventually the Chucky franchise got ridiculous too. But once again, I still love them. Because again, you get to a point where, you can't expect too much from it, except for just to, maybe a few little surprises here and there. But you pay your money to go see the movie or to buy the movie, and you just want to, watch them do their thing. And, as long as the movie's fun and entertaining, then hey, you got your money's worth. And, that's the way I felt about Friday the 13th 9 as well. Jason Goes to Hell. Because, it was kind of a stupid concept to have Jason pass around from body to body. But it was fun. It was entertaining. I still got my money's worth. Let's see. What's some of the other favorite ones? Hellraiser. One of my favorite, believe it or not, and I know a bunch of people are going to trash talk me for saying this, but Hellworld was not my favorite Hellraiser movie, but it was pretty high up there, at least for the first time I watched it. And maybe it's because I was probably stoned when I watched it. But, it messed with me so hard to the point that, you didn't know what was going on. And it was, almost freaking me out a little bit, and that's hard to do. But, you know, then they eventually brought it all full circle. And it's kind of ironic for me to say that, because Pinhead is actually only in the movie for maybe 30 seconds. Uh, you know, there's not much Pinhead in Hell World. But anyway, let's talk about some of the newer movies that I actually love. And this is a series of movies here that I didn't think I would like. I stayed away from them because the commercials made it look like it was, stuff that was being overdone. And a lot of the stuff, like these movies, have been overdone. But when I went back and I watched them all, they were actually pretty friggin' good. And that was the Conjuring and Annabelle movies. It actually blew me away. All of them were good. I enjoyed every single one of those movies. I think it's 4 of them so far. And I think The Nun is supposed to come out 2018, if I'm not mistaken. But out of those 4 movies, the one that really got me was Conjuring 2. The Conjuring 2, and keep in mind, even as a child, there was only a couple movies that managed to give me nightmares or leave me creeped out. And that was Poltergeist and The Exorcist. But at any rate, so I watched The Conjuring 2, and it didn't give me nightmares, but it did creep me the hell out. That was creepy as hell. And, coming from me, that actually means something. So The Conjuring 2 was awesome. If you like to watch movies and actually get creeped out, Conjuring 2 is one of the best paranormal horror movies that I've seen in a very, very long time. And, yeah, another one that I had passed up a whole bunch of times and finally watched it, I think it was this past Halloween actually, was 1408. And once again, I'm like, I was kind of hesitant to watch it before, and then I actually sat down and watched it, and 1408 was crazy. It was another one of those movies that at least the first time you watch it, you're like, you don't know what the hell is going on for sure. And I like that. I like movies that will mess with your mind and make you question everything that you're seeing. That's the kind of movie that I'm into. So 1408, I highly recommend it. Let's see. Let's go back to the 80s. There was a movie that I saw, actually just a few years ago, really, but it came out, I believe, 1983, and so I watched it. I saw it one year on Halloween on Netflix, and that was The Keep. And I only found out a couple days ago that was actually based on a novel called The Keep. That was actually the first part of a 6-part series of novels that I'm going to have to find some money to buy to go out and find them and, actually sit down and read those 6 novels. Because The Keep, I think it's one of those movies, either you hate it or you love it. And I loved it. The concept is, very unique, or at least was very unique for its time. I think it still holds up today pretty much. And, yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk too terribly much about, the plot and the details, because if you haven't seen it, I don't want to give anything away. That's the hard part talking about these movies because I don't want to, spoil it for people that have not seen them. But, you know, anyway, there's still a whole lot of horror movies that I haven't seen. Um, because, so many of these movies come out every year. And I'm still catching up from, the 80s, 70s, and stuff. There's still a whole bunch of 1930s, 40s, and 50s movies that I haven't seen yet. I still haven't seen The Freak uh, from back in the 30s, believe it or not. I've seen, of course, White Zombie, Dracula, The Wolf Man, uh, you know, but there's still a whole lot that I haven't seen. And it used to be that, even the bad ones were pretty good at the end of the day. And now there's, I don't know, it's like there's hundreds and hundreds of horror movies that come out each year, and there's like, 9 or 10 of them that are actually pretty good. And one of those a few years back was the Babadook. Babadook. And, the Babadook was another one of those original type of movies. I've really can't think of anything that I've seen like the Babadook. Again, I don't want to give anything away if you haven't seen it, but if you haven't seen it, go see it. It should still be on Netflix. I went ahead and bought the Blu-ray because it was so awesome. It's one of the best examples of horror storytelling that I've seen in a very, very long time. So, definitely go and check that out. One day I would like to be able to make some movies myself. I've got all kinds of ideas running through my head. My movie, The Sickness, is the one that, I've got the most thought out. But I've got ideas for not just horror movies, dramas, thrillers, even some comedies. But, I'd like to get into filmmaking one day if I can ever afford to go to school. I love this stuff, so. But at any rate, I see that we're almost up to a half an hour, so I'm going to probably go ahead and cut this short. Um, anyway, thanks for sitting down and talking with me. This has been Timmy G's Talking Stuff and Stuff. Stay on the lookout. We're going to have more unboxings coming this month. Check out the ones I just unboxed from Don't Eat the Gum. And I will catch you in the next one.
Timmy G is talking stuff, talking stuff. He's talking stuff. Timmy G be talking stuff, talking stuff. He talking about stuff.